Hello everyone. Today we're going to do a video that's not fountain pen related, but actually my other passion, and that is art. And especially art collecting, I suppose. I'm a visual artist and a picture framer, and I have lots of weird little things I'm passionate about. And one of them is uh, collecting art, oddly enough. And one of the ways I do it is I haunt thrift shops and yard sales, and every now and then something turns up, and you can find a nice little picture. And what I'm going to talk about is what artists and collectors should not do, and especially when it comes to presenting your artwork. So what we have here is a piece that I found recently at a thrift shop, and it's just this rather nice looking landscape. I don't know who it's by, and there's no identifying marks on it that tells me any a signature or a symbol or anything like that. But when I found this, it was in a cheap frame, and at first I thought it was just a cheap reproduction, a print of some form. And the reason is, on the surface, if you look, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a plastic laminate, also known as Satinex. Quite often, working in a frame shop, we get a lot of posters and photographs, and somebody just wants to put a simple frame around it, but they don't want to use glass. So what you do as a picture framer, when you have a poster or a photograph, or a print of some form, you dry mount it onto a hardboard, and then you put a plastic film that is heat sealed onto the surface. Perfectly fine if you have a poster and you just want to preserve it. Makes it lightweight, relatively inexpensive. But in this case, when I looked at this, I saw that it had a plastic laminate over it. I thought, oh, it's just a poster or a print. But I noticed a couple things. There's impasto in the brushwork, and I also noticed right up here at the top there was a crack, and that to me looked like it had at one point been on a piece of paper that had deteriorated or left unframed for quite a while and got damaged. And then somebody went to a framer and said, I would just like to have this Satinex and dry mount it and tossed it in a cheap frame. Will you do that for me? So here's the thing. I've been a picture framer, or I worked in the picture framing industry since 1988, long time. And I work independently from home now, doing different things for clients. And in retail, customer is always right, but not if you walk into a frame shop, because the framer has, a good framer has accumulated a lot of knowledge. That's the way I look at it over time. And one of the things I would not do as a picture framer is laminate or Satinex a piece of original artwork. It's a no-no. The customer might ask for that, and then I would explain to them why I am very uncomfortable in doing that, and I would give them other options. For instance, this is on paper. What I would have done is matte the picture with acid-free museum matting. I would have put an acid-free barrier behind it, say an acid-free foam core or an acid-free mat board. There's a couple different ways of doing it. That's what I would have recommended. Sometimes when somebody comes in, and they're the artist and they just want to preserve something, they can talk you into Satinexing something for them, and that happens. But over the years, I've had people request that I do certain things, and I've said no. Like, for instance, I remember I had a customer wanting me to cut down a painting, but it wasn't. They weren't the artist. They just owned the painting, and I knew the artist in question. The artist was a friend of mine, and I said I would not do it because, and I explained to them, if my friend, the artist, found out that I had cut down their painting, it would have just been incredibly stressful. He would have been furious, and I would have been, he would have been justified in his anger. So I didn't do it, and I got the customer to properly frame it, and everybody was happy in the end. Now, if an artist comes in and they have a piece that they had done, professional artists wouldn't do it, but sometimes a hobbyist says, they might say, just satin exit. And I have seen this done before. It's not something I recommend. Now, like I said, at first when I saw the satin X on this, I thought it was an original piece of artwork. But the impasto on the brush strokes right here and certain areas made me think it was an original piece. It's probably a student piece of artwork and everything. Now, I took it out of the frame and it was mounted onto a regular piece of mat board. There's two grades. There's regular, which is like just an inexpensive mat board, and then there's, of course, acid-free mat boards. Most often these days you see acid-free. And I was able to peel off the mat board, and I got it off. And what I found on the back, which proved that it is an original piece of artwork, is some sketches, which is kind of interesting. So obviously this came out of a sketchbook of some kind. You have somebody who is doing some still life studies and, kind of learning how to paint, possibly. Like there's obviously evidence that they were, working probably in a class, or maybe they're working at home trying to improve their skills. And so that, to me, proves that this is an original piece of artwork. Once again, sadly, no name that I can see. But, yeah. But on the front, it is actually a nice little painting. Not necessarily to everybody's taste, not necessarily to my taste, but there was something about it. And the reason I picked it up is, I'm not going to keep this in my collection, but as a picture framer, I often like to take something, I'll find something in a thrift shop, and I take it home, and I use it as a piece that I can experiment on, if that might sound wrong. I'm not going to experiment on the piece. The piece is going to be fine, but I'm going to experiment making a nice frame for it. Just something, like try to design something new for me, and make something that'll, hopefully showcase the painting, make it look a little better. And maybe I'll show that to you someday. So I have a couple ideas. I have a few things I want to make for it. And then what do? I post them on Instagram, and they pile up around the house. Sometimes I give them away. Sometimes I sell them. Mostly they pile up. But I like to use this as a design inspiration. So I'll come up with some kind of a design for a new frame and learn something, hopefully, in the process. Now, what would I have suggested to the artist walking in and they wanted something done? Well, okay, the paper is deteriorating. There's some staining coming through, which to me suggests that it's oil paint on paper. So sometimes when you have oil paint on paper, the oils soak through and the paper deteriorates. So maybe the artist just wanted to try to preserve it. What I would have done then, and also because it's on paper, sometimes it's hard to frame. What I probably would have recommended, if they wanted to just set it in a simple frame, was, rather than satinexing it, I would have probably used an acid-free dry mounting process, where you use acid-free dry mounting material, tissue, and you mount it on an acid-free support, like a board, like an 8-ply acid-free mat board or a heavier paper. And then I would have just left the surface untouched, because if it was an oil painting, it doesn't need glass. If it's an acrylic painting, it doesn't need glass. The film that the paint creates is the protective surface. You could have also dried mounted it acid-free, and if the artist wanted to, you could have put a varnish on the surface. Now, the great thing about acid-free dry mounting, using acid-free tissue, is if you reheat it, it will come off. It is reversible. And one of the things I've always been told and trained to do is when you're framing something, it should be reversible. It's, especially with our original artwork. So if you have an original piece of artwork, it should be, you should be able to take it out of the frame. It shouldn't be permanently sealed in. It shouldn't be sat next. Everything you do should be reversible. Even like a varnish is reversible. Takes a little, it takes somebody who knows what they're doing, but they can take layers of varnish off old paintings. And so I would have mounted this, and then I would have framed it in a wider frame in a traditional oil painting or acrylic painting style. And that would have been quite nice. And the acid-free dry mounting and the acid-free backing would have stabilized the paper and preserved the artwork. And it would have, if it ever had to be reversed, it would have been very easy to do it. So anyway, artists, collectors, hobbyists, never sat next to the surface of a painting. If it's an original artwork, an original drawing, don't sat next it. Because sadly, because it's plastic, sat next does eventually deteriorate. It becomes yellow over time. So anyway, but for now, it's a nice little painting. I'll experiment with a new design for frames. I'll see how it looks. I might try a couple different ones. Sometimes two different styles. Each one will do something different for the painting. So that's my plan. Anyway, just me rambling on. What's your greatest thrift store find? Let me know in the comments. Doesn't have to be paintings. Could be a pen, could be some item of clothing, some pieces of furniture, pottery, who knows? Sometimes if you hunt around, you'll find something nice. And I always say, recycle, reuse, upscale. Anyway, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.